In this video, we're going to talk about 1.2, Objective 5, where we identify and compare sampling methods. Let's go ahead and get started here. In phase 2 testing of a new drug designed to increase the red blood cell count, a researcher obtains envelopes with the names and addresses of all treated subjects. She wants to increase the dosage in a subsample of 15 subjects. So she thoroughly mixes all of the envelopes in a bin, then pulls 15 of those envelopes to identify the subjects to be given the increased dosage. So what type of sampling is used? That is a simple random sample. And the way we know it's a simple random sample is that the procedure is likely to yield a representative sample because there's no bias in the selection process. Everyone had an equally likely chance of being chosen. That's what makes it a simple random sample. And that's a very good way to get a representative sample that doesn't have biases, to make sure you have a process where everyone has an equally likely chance of getting chosen. So putting everybody into a bag or a bucket or something, mixing it all up and randomly pulling the names out like that, where it was the names were concealed from you and you couldn't possibly try and influence who you picked. That's a really good way to do it. On days of presidential elections, the news media organize an exit poll in which specific polling stations are randomly selected and all voters are surveyed as they leave the premises. So what type of sample is being used? This is called cluster sampling, because they are picking clusters of the polling places in particular precincts or districts or whatever. They're picking them and they're sampling everybody there. So that's called a cluster sample. And the procedure is likely to be representative because the polling stations are randomly chosen and because all people at the chosen polling stations are part of the sample. So that's D. An engineering student measures the strength of fingers used to press the button on a newly designed answering machine by testing a friend's family members. So what type of sample is used? That's a convenience sampling. And is the procedure likely to yield a representative sample or bias sample? Explain why. The procedure is likely to be biased because it consists of family members likely to have similar physical characteristics and exercise habits. So that's D. Also, we have a very small sample size there from that convenience sample as well, which may not be representative of the general population. So, marketing expert for a particular magazine is planning a survey in which 515 people will be randomly selected from each age group, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, and so on. And you see these groups that are split into lower boundary and upper boundary. This is stratified sampling here. So because we've cut them into strata there. The procedure likely to yield a representative sample or a bias sample, and explain why. The procedure is likely to be biased because people from those age groups are not evenly distributed throughout the population. So lots of times stratified sampling is a good technique, but in this case, um, it's not going to be. So um, a college dean obtains an alphabetical list of all full-time students at her college, and she selects every 30th name on the list and interviews these students to find the amount of financial aid received by each of them. She uses the results to estimate the average or mean amount of financial aid received by college students in the United States. So, what type of sampling is used? And this is going to be systematic because there's a system to choosing every 30th name on the list. So it's not random where everybody has an equally likely chance of being chosen, but it is systematic where you aren't trying to control the outcome. Um, so is the procedure likely to yield a representative sample or a biased sample? The procedure is likely to yield a biased sample because the students she interviews are all from the same school. So you're not restricting your question here only to financial aid um, received by college students at the university. They're trying to make a statement about the average amount of financial aid received by college students in the United States. And picking just the students from your one school, not going to be representative of all college students at all schools in the country. So, uh, a market researcher says that 58 randomly selected drivers from uh, surveys 58 randomly selected drivers from each state and obtains the amount that they paid for a gallon of gas at their most recent purchase. So, what type of sampling is used? This is stratified sampling, where they're taking um, the same. They're uh, each state is a strata, right? That's what's going on there. So, is the procedure likely to yield a representative sample or a bias sample, and explain why? The procedure is likely to yield a bias sample because the population does not have uh, equal numbers of people in each of the 50 states. So that's C. So your 58 randomly selected drivers in a small state like Delaware are going to, um, that's, they've got maybe less gas stations that, you're looking at that all might basically have the same price and same influence and everything, as opposed to like 58 people from California as a drop in the bucket. And anyways, there's you're not you're not really getting a good picture of the entire country there by asking 58 people from each state. Let's just put it that way. Um, a famous magazine chooses its most impressive comedians by compiling responses from readers who mail in a survey printed in the magazine. So, what type of sample is being used? This is a convenience sample. And is it likely to show bias? Yes, the procedure is likely to yield a bias sample because it is a self-selected sample that people have to choose to respond. Consists of those with strong feelings about the topic. So that's D. sample of manufactured tires is obtained by using a computer to randomly generate a number between 1 and 1100 inclusive for each tire, and the tire is tested if the generated number is 1100. What type of sample is being used? That's a simple random sample. So every tire has an equally likely chance of being selected. Is the procedure likely to be a representative sample or bias sample, and explain why? The procedure is likely to yield a representative sample because a simple random sampling technique is unlikely to yield a bias sample. So, you know, keep going here. Let's use the following to answer parts A through C below. A government agency plans to conduct a survey to identify the average or mean amount of arsenic found in the rice grown in farms located in Arkansas. Arkansas has about 3,000 rice farms. So what would be a practical problem of using stratified sampling consisting of rice obtained from every rice farm in Arkansas? So the problem would be that stratified sampling would require the sample to be obtained from every one of the 3,000 rice farms, and that would be an overwhelming project. So there we go. Question B, what would be a practical problem in using cluster sampling? And cluster sampling would require that all of the rice be tested at randomly selected farms. So that's also a problem, to test all of the rice from particular farms. So what would be an effective sampling plan? To select a random sample of farms, and at each of the selected farms randomly select a sample of rice to test. So that would be C. Let's look at number 10. A research group wants to conduct a survey of parents of elementary school students in Minneapolis by using telephone calls instead of personal visits. Assume they have directories listing phone numbers of all or almost all of the parents at each of the city's elementary schools. Which type of sample should be used? And the answer here is a stratified sample in which a few parents at each school are selected. So that would be A. And then there's another flowchart video question here that we've already addressed that flowchart video. We're going to answer another question about it here. Which of the following describes a voluntary response sample? And so your options are publish a survey question in a national newspaper and ask readers to respond, post a survey question on the internet and ask readers to respond to that question, mail a survey question to 1,000 randomly selected adults and ask them to return their responses by mail. All of these are examples of a voluntary response sample. Okay, that's it for this video. We will come back next time and talk about 1.3 Objective 1. See you for the next video.